Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 340. A Road That Isn't a Road. Part 1. Immediately after the collapse of Olympus in Gigantomachia, the restrictions on the giants disappeared. They were freed from the old story and would be reborn as participants in new scenarios. There is no desire to repeat the old battle. Do you agree? I agree. Briareus, leader of the giants, and Dionysus, interim representative of the 12 gods, reached a dramatic agreement just before the end of the 60th scenario. The star stream has acknowledged this myth collapse. A new story is blooming in the 60th scenario. In fact, they could have fought more if they wanted to fight. However, the power of Olympus had been drastically weakened through Gigantomachia. Many heroes and giants died, Poseidon's whereabouts were unclear, and the silent underworld king announced his successor. In such a situation, the existence of the nebula would be jeopardized if the 12 gods and giants were to keep confronting each other. The downfall of the giant nebula, Olympus. At the center of this ridiculous story, there was a small nebula. A number of constellations are shouting the name, Kim Dokja's company. The story, which began with the struggle of a small constellation, was finally coming to the end with a giant story. Despite this, the members of the nebula didn't appreciate the giant story and were calling someone's name. Dokja SSI. Dokja SSI. Hyung. Don't mess around. Where are you hiding? Yong Hee-won, Lee Hyun-sung, Lee Jae-hai, Lee Gil-young, Shin Yu-sung. They were looking for Kim Dokja on the small island made by the giants. Someone sounded uneasy, while another had an expression full of disbelief. The only one who remained calm in this chaos was the one staring up at the sky with an expressionless face. Han Soo-young stared closely at him and asked, "Yu Jong-hyuk, do you know something? Answer me. The kids are worried." Yu Jong-hyuk slowly turned towards Han Soo-young. The party members noticed something and gathered behind Han Soo-young. "Master, what is it? Do you know something? What happened to Dokja SSI again?" Yu Jong-hyuk was silent for a while before replying, "Kim Dokja has returned to Earth." "What? Without us?" Lee Jae-hai belatedly discovered something and opened her mouth. "Ah, don't tell me?" In retrospect, Gigantomachia wasn't their real purpose. In the beginning, participating in Gigantomachia was only a process. While everyone was feeling excited by the joy of victory, only Kim Dokja was thinking about the real purpose of this task. Yong Hee-won sighed with relief and smiled. Still, he didn't have to quickly go back on his own. "We'll go back too." Then a system message emerged. The region will be restricted for 1 hour to stabilize the scenario. Lee Seal-wa's eyes widened with surprise. How did Dokja SSI get out of here? He probably used a special method. A special method? I don't know anything else. Yu Jong-hyuk replied and stared up at the sky again. It was still snowing. Snow was falling in summer weather. Based on Earth tie, it was snowing in August. Han Soo-young stared into his eyes and asked him, "Did Kim Dokja go back first, because of you Senga?" There was a reason for asking what should have been obvious. Yu Jong-hyuk's answer came back after the miraculous snow melted in the sun. "You'll know when you see it." In the vehicle that ran in dimensions, I was lost in thoughts. During the time when I was planning to overthrow Gigantomachia, I had contacted several constellations. Perhaps all those with the slightest acquaintance received my call. Most of them were in a special relationship with Olympus or were in a difficult position to participate in the 60th scenario. I could understand. What constellation would want to be in a hostile relationship with a big nebula like Olympus? Nevertheless, there was one who made a unique suggestion. "I can't help in Gigantomachia, but if you fail, I can pave the way for you to get away. It can only be you." The one who made the suggestion was now sitting in the driver's seat and holding the steering wheel. "I didn't know you would take advantage of my proposal in this way." The owner of the special fair origine who could use the portals of the scenario because of his probability and who had free access to the dimension. The mass production maker laughed. Originally, you were a type who rarely asked for help from someone else. My thoughts are a bit different after coming back from another world. I smiled and added, in addition, I accidentally left the X-grade Ferrorigine behind. I haven't finished the installment plan yet, so I'm still crying whenever I think about it. Haha, the car you bought from me? Thus, in the future, I have decided to ride in other people's cars without driving my own. It is a disappointing decision from a seller's position. This time a new model came out and I was going to give you a free one. For free? I'm lying. I knew it. There was no way this constellation would see any losses. The mass production maker seemed to think of something as he held a cigarette in his mouth. The scattered smoke was sucked into the vents installed before it could reach me in the passenger's seat. I want to make a contract with your nebula. Contract? Do you know what you've done this time? I knew. I couldn't not know. The giant story torch that swallowed the myth is flowing through your veins. It was because even now, the result of what I had done was flowing through the veins in my body. Torch that swallowed the myth. This story wasn't the one who erases God's fingerprints or person who closes the door of a myth that I had originally intended to obtain. Still, its essence was similar. The story of fighting against a great nebula and overthrowing myths. This story would be a counter for the numerous nebulae I would fight in the future. Many constellations have come to know of Kim Dokja's company. Yes. Some of them even claim that you should put your nebula in one of the 12 great nebulae. The 12 great nebulae. I didn't realize I was already in a position to hear this story. The 12 great nebulae dominating the star stream considered of 3 strong, 4 medium and 5 weak ones. Olympus, who was located between the 3 strong and 4 medium ones, was greatly upset this time and someone had to fill that space. There are many hasty stars. They're always like this. Then the mass production maker wants to take advantage of this opportunity to sign a contract with my nebula. That's right. There was no hesitation in the mass production maker's answer. I'd like to lead this new product's advertisement to your nebula. That's good. I will ask the members of my nebula. Great. The incarnation I want to appear personally is. I listened to the mass production maker while staring out the window of the scenes passing by the Ferrorigine. The seasons of the myriad of stories flowed through the landscape. The seasons of numerous stories flowed in the passing landscape. That's right. Suddenly. It is fast. As I spoke, I subconsciously grabbed the bottle of star fluid in my pocket. I had come this far faster than any of the original rounds. Yet this speed was only a relative speed. I didn't know if this was fast enough. The mass production maker laughed and said, "This new product is a bit faster. You will know if you drive it yourself, but the driving sensation is very. The time is too slow compared to the driving speed. Are you doing this intentionally to talk about the contract?" What are you talking about? I am going the fastest way. Look, it is already the last intersection. As the mass production maker said, there were 3 portals emitting a white light on the other side of the dimension. I didn't ask, but the mass production maker explained. One is the road to Earth and the other is the road to the context of the constellations. What is the last one? A road that looks like a road. The mass production maker smiled significantly. It was much darker than other portals and gave off a shady vibe. Do you know what is at the end? Of course, I didn't know. I might have read Ways of Survival, but there wasn't a description of all the portals in the dimension. In other words, this portal was a road that didn't exist in Ways of Survival. What is it? It's nothing. It is just a blocked road. The answer came back like it was obvious. Before I could say anything, the mass production maker continued. The end of some roads. The road that looks different from other roads, it is a road that no one walked or a road that isn't even a road. The Ferrorigine sped past the dark portal. The sparkling navigation system was showing the route to Earth. On the screen, the portal we had just gone past was marked as no road. Such roads are usually cut off in obscure places. The people who chose to walk along the path believe it is the end. What is your meaning? Please choose your path well. The mass production maker put out the cigarette and gave his distinctly gentle smile. Sometimes the thing that looks like a road isn't a road. The next moment, the landscape of the dimension changed. I saw the appearance of the blue planet and landed on the ground. The mass production maker told me, "We've arrived. Fortunately, this time it is good." The moment I arrive in Seoul, I naturally headed to the factory. It was to the hospital ward where patients were admitted. The moment I stepped into the ward, I heard a voice that was close to a true voice. "You came." It sounded like a true voice, but it wasn't a true voice. It was a voice where the dignity of a transcendent could be heard. A blue-white magic power filled the air. As expected, every teacher wanted to look good in front of their student. "This poor disciple is greeting you. There is no time. Leave the greetings for later. Go." Perhaps it was the aftermath of the returnees' war, but Kyrios had bandages wrapped around his body. The heavenly demon and blood demon. I killed them. Don't talk to me and go quickly. I was amazed by the calm declaration. He survived the heavenly demon and blood demon who killed the breaking the sky sword saint in a past life. I didn't realize my teacher in this round was so strong. Aileen found me in the distance and came running. She was the only story expert in the factory. If she wasn't here, 2 of the party members would have already died. I waved the star fluids and shouted, "I brought the star fluid." You haven't been told yet, but..." "I already know." In the distance, 2 red rooms could be seen. One was the hospital room of Usenga and the other. "How is my mother?" "Her symptoms are almost the same as Usenga." "The severity of the symptoms?" "More or less the same level." I knew that my mother had been overworking herself. The stigma giant future placed a great burden on the user's body. Moreover, the contract with the nebula itself was in an obscure form and the burden increased even more after my mother's sponsor lost strength. Aileen took the star fluids from me and spoke in a dark voice. "I think it is lacking. That's why I have 2 bottles. They are different types. I didn't bring only 1 star fluid. There was the nectar from Dionysus as well as the soma I was originally supposed to receive from Surya." Eileen's expression glowed as she received the 2 bottles of star fluids. "Medical staff." The staff rushed at her signal towards the 2 hospital rooms. Someone brushed past me and the wound in my side caused by Poseidon throbbed. My vision blurred for a moment. I might need to receive treatment. No, it would be strange to be fine after being hit by a myth-grade constellation. I worked hard to hide the pain from the wound. My consciousness was unstable. The doors to the hospital rooms seemed like the entrance to the portal that the mass production maker had shown me. "Are you okay?" Kyrios flew through the air and asked me. I replied that I was fine. To be exact, it felt like I answered, but I lost consciousness for a while. Once I woke up, I was lying on a chair in the ward. Aileen was standing in front of me. I endured the pain and stood up. "What happened to the 2 people?" I immediately asked, despite my blurred consciousness. However, Eileen's expression was strange. "It isn't enough." "It isn't enough?" "What?" "The 2 of them worsened faster than I thought. I can barely cure 1 person if I use both star fluids." I couldn't understand the words. Eileen's words sounded like faraway alien words, like she was an outer god. What do you mean?" "Demon King of Salvation." Aileen formally called out my modifier. She only called me this when she needed my orders. The 2 rooms were wide open, like a portal waiting for me. You can only save 1 person. Chapter 341. A Road That Isn't a Road. Part 2. All types of thoughts passed through my head. The 4th wall is shaking violently. There were 2 doors, and someone seemed to be whispering to me. I could go inside one of them. However, if I chose one, then I had to give up the other one. I couldn't do that. Demon King of Salvation. Yes. If you delay, then you can't save either of them. There was no sense of reality in Eileen's voice. Please wait a moment. In my dizzy vision, the corridor across from the two hospital rooms was seen. The words of the mass production maker crossed my mind. It's nothing. It is just a blocked road. The end of the corridor was dim, so I couldn't see anything. Yet everyone knew that there was nothing at the end of that corridor. In the first place, the corridor was made to have nothing. Kim Dokja thought, it isn't possible. Stay calm. There must be a way. I had come all this way, and now I had to choose between the two people? Who should live and who should die? I couldn't do that. The fourth wall is looking at you. But you have already chose senator. At the moment, the scene of the first scenario filled my head. The shaky subway. The appearance of those who died. Maybe I could have saved everyone there. THS, you can CHS this TI me too. It was different now. WH it is different? Rather than replying to the fourth wall, I asked Aileen, how much time is left? Around 20 minutes. Lee Sukyang SSI's side is more critical. After that. 20 minutes. It was short, but there was enough time to try this and that. It was too early to give up. If there is more star fluid, can you save both of them? There isn't a lot of possibility. I immediately pulled out the old to new toad. The toad cried out. Give me an old house, and I'll give you a new house. I pointed to the half-filled bottle of nectar and asked, can you change this to something new? Then the old to new toad shook its head. It isn't old or new. This was half-eaten by me. Thus, it is old. I'll give you other items if you fill up a new bottle. The change. I can't help you. As expected, such a trick wasn't possible with the star fluid. I had thought it might be possible. Tired, don't call me. Perhaps it was tired from swallowing the giant soldier earlier, but the old to new toad fell asleep. I put it away and decided to try a second method. If I couldn't duplicate it, I had to get a new one. The Demon King of Salvation, the use of the indirect message is cancelled. The indirect messaging function is currently disabled due to checking and repairing certain scenarios. What? The scenario being checked is the 60th scenario. It was an unexpected situation I hadn't thought of. I didn't think the aftermath of the 60th scenario would reach this far. I needed the help of other constellations to get new star fluids. Jang Haeung. At my cry, Eileen's gaze moved to another place. The place where Jang Haeung was located was Yusenga's hospital room. The moment I stood on the threshold of the hospital room where the emergency light was on, a cold sensation went down my back. You can't enter without permission. Someone yelled at me. The fragments of the story scattered from Yusenga hovered in the air. I tried to ignore it and turned to Jang Haeung. Jang Haeung was sleeping in a corner of the hospital room. Jang Haeung. Wake up. Quickly. Wait a minute. He is also in critical condition. The medical staff rushed over and pulled me away. Jang Haeung had a large number of story packs inserted in him and bandages were wrapped around his body. He was seriously wounded in the returnees' war. However, I needed Jang Haeung's skill. The unidentified wall is looking at you. The fourth wall is facing the unidentified wall. Sparks bounced as I felt the gaze of the wall. It was a coldness with no sense of cooperation at all. It was going to be like this? I opened bookmark. In the end, the unidentified wall was also a skill. I still didn't have a good understanding of Jang Haeung and needed some luck, but I started looking for Jang Haeung's name in the list of bookmarks. Perhaps it felt uncomfortable due to my actions? The unidentified wall warned. The unidentified wall says, "You are not my master. Don't do anything unnecessary. I need your help." I told it honestly. It was urgent. If you don't help me, you have to wake up your master. The wall was silent for a moment. It was a silence that showed it was thinking about something. A moment later, a message from the wall came back. The unidentified wall says, "I'll help you." At the same time, a small partition of space was created around me. It was a space reminiscent of Aminosoft in turn a long time ago. A large panel was created in front of me, and there was a familiar type of input device. Perhaps Jang Haeung had listened to the stories of countless constellations in this small wall. Jang Haeung listened to stories that were written on this wall like graffiti and the unidentified wall says, "Do a good job." I had nothing to say. I looked down at the sleeping Jang Haeung for a moment before turning my head. First of all, it was important to turn off the emergency light. The unidentified wall has temporarily granted you a license. Enter the destination to send a message to. The first constellation was Dionysus. The message can't be sent to the constellation. At present, all communications with the nebula Olympus is paralyzed. I ran into a snag from the beginning. I quickly changed the receiver of the message. Then a reply immediately came back. "You need more soma? I'm sorry, but I gave all the soma I had to you." The reply was from Surya. The situation here also wasn't easy. Is it difficult to request more from the nebula? I withdrew from Vedas and lost the soma production rights. Is Dionysus beside you? After a few moments, there was an answer from Surya. Recently, Olympus is suffering from the famine story and the supply of nectar is cut off. There is no more left to give you. I understand. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't help. No. It was impossible to ask for anything further when I already received Surya's help in Gigantomachia. I thought about various types of star fluids that appeared in ways of survival through my head. However, none that could replace nectar and soma were available right away. I desperately bit my lips. If treatment wasn't possible, then I had to find another way. Sending a message to Constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring. Since Persephone and Hades weren't members of Olympus, it was possible to communicate with them through the unidentified wall. I didn't want to use this method, but it wasn't time to cover up cold water with warm water. Nevertheless, the answer that came back from Persephone wasn't very positive. "Son, as you might know, a presence broken through the flow of consciousness is. All souls of this world go to the underworld, but that is a case when the soul is intact. As expected, it is like this." I actually expected it a bit. The flow of consciousness was a phenomenon where the stories of the soul were broken. A soul suffering from this disease wouldn't go to the underworld. To be exact, it didn't go anywhere. It just ended there. Just as everyone who walked on the wrong road disappeared forever. Persephone continued speaking. "Son. It is a situation where the succession isn't properly established yet. Don't call me that right now." I responded quickly before disconnecting. I opened the smartphone and then the file of ways of survival. There was still a method. There had to be. The unidentified wall says, "You have done too many things that went against probability." Shut up. The unidentified wall says, "That probability was bound to come back to you. It is a law of this world." I told you to shut up. I quickly read Ways of Survival. I found several times when Yu Jong-hyuk met similar challenges in Ways of Survival. For example, the 161st and 275th rounds. In those rounds, Yu Jong-hyuk was in a situation where he could only save one of his two colleagues. When told he could only save Lee Seolwa or Lee Jae-hai, Yu Jong-hyuk had replied, "I will save both." The same was true for the 275th round. Lee Hyun-sung and Shin Yu-sung. In a situation where only one of them could be saved, Yu Jong-hyuk declared, "I will save both of them." This was Yu Jong-hyuk's answer. Thus, Yu Jong-hyuk of the 161st and 275th round failed. He couldn't save Lee Seolwa, Lee Jae-hai, Lee Hyun-sung or Shin Yu-sung. Then he died himself. Yet every time, Yu Jong-hyuk made the same choice, and I would choose the same. My right hand holding the phone trembled nervously, and I gripped it tightly. Boutique Kim Dok-ja, isn't Yoo Jong-hyuk? Yoo Jong-hyuk was able to make such a choice because he was a regressor. A regressor different from me. An existence who could repeat life many times. On the other hand, I only had this one life. Therefore, this life didn't allow me to make any mistakes. If I made a mistake, someone would die. Thus, I couldn't make any mistakes. I had come all this way while taking the risk of twisting probability. Up to this point, I thought I had done well. Briareus had told me. The real fate is inevitable. If you avoid it, probability must be distorted. The twisting of probability had to be resolved by someone. I knew. I knew it very well. I was dissatisfied. Why? JSSI. Why should they be the ones to resolve it? JSSI. 1 drop, 2 drops. The voice that touched me was like a drop of water through hard granite. I looked behind me. JSSI, I'm fine. Through the curtains of the hospital room where Yusanga lay, the fragments of the broken story flowed out and spoke to me. Save Sukian SSI. No voice came from my half-open mouth. Yet she replied like she heard my words. I have a way to survive. I have already found a way through Hermes' system. The exclusive skill lie detection LV7 is activated. You have confirmed that the statement is false. You sang. JSSI. It wasn't meant to call out to me. Yusanga's voice was unbelievably firm. One day, I remembered a time when I teamed up with Yusanga. Even then, Yusanga was the same. Every time she insisted on something she thought was right, she would never bend herself. Yusanga would speak in this calm but strong tone. It was like appeasing a panicked little child. JSSI, listen carefully to me. Please be calm and rational. Why? Yusanga's words were familiar. I still have some time remaining. However, Sukyung SSI wouldn't be able to recover unless she is saved now. Why did I feel like I was sitting in a subway seat, and why did it feel like this trembling hand wasn't mine? It is like a game quest. A quest that can be cleared properly if we follow the set route. Yusanga SSI. JSSI, it is time to carry out the quest properly now. I understood Yusanga's words. Perhaps I could understand better than anyone in the world. However, I couldn't understand the Yusanga speaking right now. Perhaps I would never understand in this lifetime. Or I should say that I didn't dare understand it. The fourth wall has increased its thickness. Like the Yusanga who stood up on the subway, I stood up and declared, Aileen. Aileen noticed my intentions and nodded. The medical staff standing next to Yusanga rushed to the other side of the room. I also slowly turned to the opposite side of the room. The moment I went beyond the threshold, I couldn't help looking back. Don't worry. I'll be waiting here. Beyond the curtain, Yusanga's silhouette had already scattered a lot. Maybe, beyond that would be a Yusanga I already didn't know. She might be torn and scattered apart, something that was no longer recognizable. I might be hearing the voice of Yusanga, who was already disappearing. Nevertheless. Yusanga SSI. I don't know if you remember, but I screened people's lives in the first scenario. I continued speaking towards the Yusanga I remembered. I only let people I thought should survive, live. I thought I should have done it in order to see the end of this world. JSSI. However, if this is the one way I can see the ending of this story, I would rather not see the ending. In order to revive someone, another person had to die. If there is a choice over lives, it is a bad story in the first place. At my answer, the mass production maker might say this, it is a road that isn't a road. The fourth wall is looking at you. Nevertheless, this wasn't a choice. There was only one way from the beginning. The constellation Demon King of Salvation is looking at the fourth wall. I wasn't Yoo Jong-hyuk. Yet when it came to this issue, my answer was the same as that guy. I'll smash that story. So that Yusanga SSI won't die. My mother too. There was a dead-end wall covered in darkness in front of my eyes. It was a hard and thick wall that I couldn't smash. I slowly reached out for that wall. Chapter 342. A Road That Isn't a Road. Part 3. It was an hour later that Yu Zhonghyuk and his colleagues returned to Earth. Yu Zhonghyuk, Han Suyang, Li Jiahai, Yong Hee-won, Li Hyunsung, Xin Yusung, Li Gilyung and Li Seolwa. The first thing they discovered after safely passing through the portal was the flashing sparks around the center of the industrial complex. The sparks of probability were striking down on the center of the factory like lightning bolts. Li Jiahai wondered, what the hell is going on? She asked, but no one could answer properly. They got on the Chimera Dragon and soon arrived at the factory. The party members jumped over the walls and ran straight to the hospital room. Flying Fox waved when he saw the people rushing in. Huh, you came back already? Yong Hee-won asked. Dr. SSI, no, where is Yusanga SSI? He is over there, though I think you need to be treated as well, we're fine. Just treat Hyunsung SSI. Wait a minute. My skin is just a bit shut up and lie down. After throwing the burnt Li Hyunsung onto a hospital bed, Yong Hee-won and the others headed to Yusanga's hospital room. Obviously, they thought Kim Dokja would first head there. Dokja SSI. Sanga SSI. Hey, everyone. If you just come in. Then the party members faced an unexpected sight after arriving. Han Suyang muttered. What is this situation? There was no one in Yusanga's hospital room apart from the minimum number of medical staff. Yusanga's soul was still broken. Kim Dokja couldn't be seen at all. A black aura was released from Han Suyang's body. I'm asking you. What is this situation? The medical staff were daunted and spat out everything that happened, from the returnees' war to Kim Dokja's return. So, Lee Suk-young went to receive treatment first. Maybe by now, the last step. Before the words finished, Han Suyang had already moved. It was so fast that no one could stop her. Han Suyang jumped over a nearby chair and grabbed the collar of a man taller than herself. You son of a bitch. You knew everything? Why didn't you talk properly? If you knew this if I said it, could you change anything? Yu Zhonghyuk's cold voice rang through the room. Han Suyang's mouth trembled. Could she change it if she knew? She didn't know. Han Suyang couldn't answer the question. Yu Zhonghyuk asked again, I asked if you could change anything? You bastard. This time, Yu Zhonghyuk didn't yield. The moment when the pressure around the two people was going to devastate the surroundings, Yong Hee-won stopped them. Stop, both of you. Can't you see that Yusanga SSI is present? The constellation demon-like judge of fire is furious. Yu Zhonghyuk shook off Han Suyang's hand and spoke to the medical staff. Where is Kim Dokja? Han Suyang also turned to the staff at the question. Rather than answering, the medical staff glanced in one direction in unison. It was a hospital room where Lee Suk-young's surgery was underway. Han Suyang asked, Kim Dokja is in that room? That's right. Aileen said he is needed. The party members approached the operating room door quietly enough not to interfere with the operation. Through the transparent glass, Aileen and Kim Dokja could be seen conducting the operation in the room. Thanks to the lighting, Kim Dokja's expression couldn't be seen, but he definitely didn't look good. Kim Dokja's hand was trembling and his gaze was slightly lowered. It was Shin Yusung who opened her mouth first. A juicy state is a bit weird. Once the operation started, the first thing Aileen said was, you must come with me. Is there anything I can do to help? Yes. The moment I entered the room, I saw the fragments of my broken mother. My mother, who defeated the returnees by summoning Pungbik, was in a state where all her stories were broken. Dokja. Somewhere, I felt I heard these words. Maybe it was my mother's stories. I thought in a reassuring manner to her. Don't worry. I didn't choose anyone. My mother's soul must be restored as quickly as possible. That way, I had the time to save you Sanga. From now on, it was the time of Aileen. Staff, begin to supply the magic power. Aileen pulled out a small brush and started to collect the floating pieces of stories, one by one. The surgery itself was simple. Collect the fragments of the scattered stories and put them together in context. It was to recover the meaning of the lost sentences. It was easy to say, but the number of people in Ways of Survival who could perform this type of major surgery could only be counted on one hand. The most remarkable one among them was Aileen Makerfield, the story expert next to me. The story person who repairs the story has started. Every word that reaches your fingertips restores itself. The end of the story was ultimately a share of the story. Every time Eileen's brush moved, the broken stories started to follow one by one. The star fluids I gained were the adhesive holding the stories together. The item soma is working. The item nectar is working. By the time 40 minutes passed in the surgery, Eileen's forehead was covered with beads of sweat. The scene of Eileen's surgery also appeared in Ways of Survival, but this was my first time actually seeing it and I was slightly impressed. Once the overall story was repaired, Aileen took a sip of water. I asked Aileen, is it okay if the fragments aren't in context? I was anxious when I saw that the story fragments Aileen put together weren't perfectly neat. Aileen lightly wiped her lips. It's fine. This is what humans are like. Certainly, her words might be true. In general, humans weren't tidy existences. By the way, Eileen's words weren't over. However, there are some sentences that can be serious if they aren't put together properly. For example, these parts. Aileen pointed to my mother's soul. Unlike the other restored areas, her half-collapsed heart hadn't been operated on. In fact, Sukianya Sasai's surgery was a bit late. Her thema is already damaged. Thema? The contents of Ways of Survival flowed through my head. Do you know that everyone's soul is made up of stories? I've heard it before. It was a story Persephone told me. Aileen continued speaking. In every soul, there is a core theme that penetrates it. The most important story that forms the essence of the soul. I belatedly recalled a mention of it in Ways of Survival. Every story has a thema. Even a story without a thema, the thema is there is no thema. Only the person who best understands the soul can touch the thema. I hesitated for a moment. Then the reason you said I should go in with you. That's right. Aileen nodded and continued, the thema can only be restored by the person who best knows the soul. You have to do this part yourself. I'll share the story. I didn't hear the end of Eileen's words. The story person who repairs the story temporarily dwells at the end of your hand. I had to do it myself? There isn't much time left. You need to start now. Medical staff, be ready to supply magic power. I stared at my mother's soul while holding the brush. My mother lay there quietly with her eyes closed, like a person covered in a shroud. There were wrinkles and wounds I didn't know about. She had stiff eyebrows and dry cheeks. Aileen said, think of it as a book. Imagine all the stories in front of you becoming a book. I looked at the difficult sentences floating in front of me and tried to show my imagination. Just like I was rereading the book I read as a child, I closed my eyes and stretched out my hand. Yes, do you want to read that book? I cleared the cover of the dust and opened it to see the first page that was broken and worn out. I opened my eyes again and saw the floating stories gathered at the end of my hand. Dokja. Sentence by sentence, the fragments started talking to me. I slowly moved the brush. I thought of my mother. I remembered my mother. There was a stale smell as words were lifted from the well of old memories. Dokja, what type of character do you like best? I remembered. The books I read with my mother for the first time. I unconsciously moved the brush. The overflowing sentences were linked through my brush. You don't seem to like the ending. However, not all stories can have happy endings. The person who gave me reasons to like books. For the sins I committed, she went to jail. The person who wrote a book about our story. The person I wanted to see, The person I resented. She was my mother, but also the person furthest from me. Dokja. Blood in the living room and the feeling of the falling knife. My mother's following words. Read it again. The moment I finished, the brush stopped. Still, my mother's thema was incomplete. Demon King of Salvation? My mother's story that I knew was up to here. Sin. If it is a sin, it's a sin. Do all prisoners think this way? It is funny, the justice of this world. There were still numerous story fragments floating around me, but they didn't talk to me anymore. The fragments had a context I didn't know. I couldn't hear them and they were unknown sentences. I was suddenly confused, as if thrown into the middle of the first book I read. The only thing I knew about Lee Suk-young was Lee Suk-young as my mother. The hand holding the brush trembled. The trembling was speaking on my behalf. I couldn't do it. This wasn't something I could do. Belated regret flooded me like waves. I should have talked to her more. I should have told her more. I should have shared more with her. The height of the hand holding the brush gradually lowered. My mother's stories were crumbling again. My mother's unknown stories drifted like they mocked me. Maybe I'm not the only one. The moment I had this thought, I felt something behind my back. Someone, who wasn't me or Aileen, was holding a brush and staring into the air. This is what she said to me. There was a middle-aged woman wearing a nice suit over a blue prison uniform. It was Cho Young-ran, who had the first spiritualist of Joseon as a sponsor. Another woman was holding a brush beside her. I can't believe I missed the days when we lined up for bread. Lee Bok-soon, who went with me to Peace Land, laughed. There were several other wanderers in the room. They each held a brush, applied the star fluid and started to attach the sentences. The stories that were difficult for me flowed freely from them. The puzzles they filled up were obvious. All the wanderers were talking about Lee Suk-young. My vision was blurred and I couldn't speak for a while. My mother's life was drawn in front of my eyes. There were several things I should have known but didn't. Even so, the wanderers didn't complete all the thema. Some fragments still remained, searching for the owner. Then somebody grabbed my hand. My hand holding the brush moved freely and attached a sentence I didn't know. The moment I was about to express my confusion, the owner of the hand cut off my words. Kim Dokja, you know you aren't a godlike person. I smelt lemon candy from the grumbling voice. Han Soo-young took the brush from my hand in a frustrated manner. There are some things in the world you don't know about, you idiot.